Hello everyone, who's ready for some Hocus Pocus? In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you guys how to make each one of these cute, delicious treats for a Hocus Pocus inspired dessert table. I also have a separate video on the spooky DIY trees that I made for this setup, as well as the tassels, so don't forget to go check that out. And if you're watching me for the first time, don't forget to subscribe, and if you already follow me, thank you so much. We're going to start by making Binks the cat. For Binks, I decided to make little mini brownie donuts. I'm using a little mini cake tin. And this is the brownie recipe that I already have in my channel. I will list the link down below if you guys want to go and check that out. I greased my mini donut pan very well, making sure that I got the middle, and then added my brownie batter. I baked these at 325 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 to 15 minutes. I let them cool off a little bit, maybe like about 5 minutes after they came out of the oven, before I started trying to take them out, and I let them completely cool before I went to the next process. I used candy corn for the ears. I'm also using a couple of piping tips for the eyes, edible food marker, black and green fondant. I'm going to use a little bit of ganache to cover the donut, as well as regular chocolate. Starting off by cutting the very top tip of the candy corn. We only need a little tiny tip. This is a very small donut, so we don't need much. I added regular chocolate. This is just regular Wilton chocolate, and I'm adding the little ears to the very top of the donut, and I'm letting this set before I dip it into my chocolate ganache. While that sets, I'm going to continue to make the ears. I'm using a round piping tip to cut out a couple of circles, and then I'm using the end of that piping tip to take off the edges of the circle, and then pinching the two sides with my finger, and then adding the little football shape in the middle. Now I'm going to dip my donut into the ganache, which I colored black, and I'm going to be adding the eyes before the ganache dries. And also I'm going to be making a little tiny oval shape for the nose, and adding it also before my ganache fully sets. And here we go, Binks the cat. How cute is this? For the next thing, we're going to do the brownie book. I also use the same recipe for these brownies. I'm also using a Wilton little candy eyes, and just regular Wilton chocolate. I'm adding the little eye in the middle, and then I'm going to go over it with the candy melt on top, just to make the eyelid and the bottom part of the eye also covering just a little bit of the white part. I piped a couple of lines on the side of the brownie, and then I'm doing a line right in the middle, a zigzag line. This is going to be the stitching of the book. I also did a kind of a figure 8 on top of the little brownie, and then I'm adding the stitching all through the line. And I added another line and did a couple of stitches as well. And this is it. This is how to make the little book. So cute. Moving on to the dead man's toast. I'm using red candy melts, as well as unsweetened cocoa powder and a couple of shaved almonds. I'm also using this sugar cookie recipe that I have. I already have a separate video on this. If you guys want to go check it out, I will also link it down below. I colored the batter green, and I made little tiny balls, like around a 1-inch tiny balls to make the fingers. I'm rolling the cookie dough in between my hands, making one side longer than the other. This is where I'm going to be inserting the wooden stick into. Once I inserted the wooden stick, I am pressing with my hands just to make sure that it's attaching really good to the cookie batter. And then with my finger, I'm pressing the very top just to make a little indent. This is where the almond is going to go, and this is for the fingernail. Now I'm dipping it in the cocoa powder and just spreading it around. There's no right way or wrong way to do this. And then I'm making 3 little lines on top of it. I'm going to bake this at 350 degrees for about 8 to 9 minutes. And once they're finally cooled off, I'm going to be adding the chocolate on the fingernail to attach the almond, and on the bottom too, to make it look like bloody. My daughter says that they look like giant fat caterpillars instead of fingers, which I thought was really, really funny. And now I'm attaching the almonds, and they don't have to be perfect. The more broken they are, the better they look. And these were my favorite treats. I also made a little tiny decal for the jar. This is where I'm going to be sticking all my little dead man's toes in, just in case nobody could figure out what the heck these things were. They look like giant caterpillars instead of toes. But they were delicious. Now I'm just adding some candy corn on the bottom of this jar, and then I'm adding a little styrofoam round circle that I cut out so I could put the toes in. Moving on to Mr. Billy Buchanan. I used the same sugar cookie recipe and I cut out a tombstone shape with the cookie cutter. Now I'm just dipping it in my gray royal icing and just spreading it throughout the cookie. I'm also going to be using a piece of parchment paper, which I scrunched up with my hands. And this is to give the cookie texture. I didn't want my cookie to look smooth. I wanted it to look old and like falling apart. So this gives it that kind of effect. Once the cookie dried, I peeled off the parchment paper, and then you can see the different indents in the cookie. Now I'm just using cocoa powder to make it look like dirty and dingy. And it looks really cute. I love this effect. I'm also going to be placing a little tiny candy skull right in the middle. And now I'm going to pipe with a piping consistency black royal icing. I'm going to pipe R.I.P. Billy. And then I'm going to let this dry before I continue to the next step. For the bottom portion, I'm going to use ganache, another square cookie. I'm using these little tiny circles and some Oreo cookie crumbs, as well as royal icing. I'm going to spread some ganache on the cookie, and then I'm going to dip this cookie into the Oreo cookie crumbs to coat it so it could look like the dirt on top of the grave. With the end of my brush, I'm clearing out a little space on the very back of the cookie. This is where I'm going to attach the tombstone to. I'm using a very thick, like piping consistency royal icing. This is how I'm going to attach the two cookies together. You could also do chocolate, but one thing about chocolate is that if it's too hot, your two cookies are going to fall apart and they will not stay. I'm also clearing a little circle in the middle. This is where I'm going to place the K-pop, and the reason I'm doing this is because if you guys have ever coated something with a cookie crumbs, you know that nothing sticks on it. So I'm clearing up the space to ensure that it's going to be, my K-pop is going to be secured to my cookie. Now I'm placing it on top of the these little cake circles, and I'm adding a little bit more royal icing on top, and this is how it came out. For Billy's head, I used a 1-inch cake ball, also a couple of sticks, white candy melt, which I just added a little bit of brown to. I'm using a couple of circles to make the hair, black fondant, and a little bit of skin color fondant. I'm going to be dipping all my K-pops in, and I'm going to let them fully set before I move on to putting anything on them. Here I'm cutting out little circles to make the hair. Now that my K-pop has set, I'm going to add a little bit of white chocolate on top to attach the little circles of fondant. And I'm going to be spreading it towards the front. I'm also going to be adding little sausages, little strips of black fondant on the sides and on the top of the head to make it look nice and messy. The messier the better. In the movie, Billy's hair is very messy, so it's okay. It doesn't have to look perfect. Now that I was happy with the head, I very carefully twisted the sticks off of the K-pops. I tried to make the face and the eyes with the edible food marker, but it wasn't working, so I had to use a couple of sprinkles and some fondant to make the mouth and the eyes. I'm adding a little bit of candy melt in the middle to attach the K-pop. I'm also doing 2 little balls for the hands and then placing the K-pop on top. And this is how I made Mr. Billy Buchanan. He's so adorable. Next treat is these little tiny mini cakes. I'm using my dense vanilla cake recipe. I will also link it down below. I'm using a 2-inch cookie cutter and the little boards to place them in. For the frosting, I decided we'll go with Frosting Pride. I colored in purple and orange. I'm also using vanilla homemade custard and a couple of piping tips, a couple of Halloween sprinkles, and these cute little toppers that I made. I'm also going to be using ganache. Let me know if you guys want to see a tutorial on the toppers. I can make one as well. And now I cut all my little cake circles into two to layer them, and I'm adding the pudding inside and putting them together and just lightly coating my little tiny cakes. I was not going to do like a whole coat. I just did like a crumb coat. The reason I decided to go with Frosting Pride instead of a regular Swiss meringue buttercream, which is what I regularly most likely will use on cake, is because it's been so extremely hot here that I didn't want to deal with having to chill my cakes every few minutes before I could finish coating all of them. With the spoon, I'm spreading the chocolate ganache on top and letting it drip to the sides to make a drip effect on my mini cakes. Now I'm piping some little dots on top using the two colors, and then I'm going to add just a couple of sprinkles and my little toppers. These little mini cakes were so delicious, you guys. I hope you guys try out the recipe. And now for the final treat is the life potion. Look at how cute these little cups came out. I am using green food dye. I'm using the Kool-Aid packet and some soda. I guess you could use any kind of soda as long as it's light. For example, like ginger ale or Sprite. I'm also, well, this is what I had, so this is what I used. And some pineapple juice. I'm going to start by adding the soda and then the pineapple juice. The recipe I saw on Pinterest said to use a green Kool-Aid packet. I couldn't find one, so I just used like a yellow one that I had, and look at what happens, you guys. I didn't know this was going to happen. Everything started bubbling. So I guess you were supposed to add the Kool-Aid packet first and the pineapple juice, and then at the end add the soda. But oh well, moving on. I have these little cute glass jars. I dip them in some candy melt, and then I tap them on the side to make kind of a drip effect, and then I cover them with sprinkles. And then I added these cute little gummy eyeballs, which I had to buy like 4 times because I kept eating them. They were so good. And this is it for my Hocus Pocus dessert table tutorial. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you guys are following me, seeing this video for the first time, don't forget to subscribe. And if you already follow me, thank you so much. Until next time.